Jace woke up to the scent of something sweet. Not just sweet, intoxicating. The air was thick with it, like overripe fruit on a summer breeze, mingled with a crispness he couldn't quite place. His head throbbed. His tongue felt heavy, dry. The last thing he remembered was the emergency alarms, the flashing red lights, the violent lurch as his ship lost control. And then, impact. Now, he lay on something soft. Not sand, not dirt. It was plush, like the mossy carpets of Earth's rainforests, but warmer. Jace blinked up at the sky, which was all wrong. Too bright, a swirling blend of pastels as if the atmosphere itself was an oil painting still drying. His pulse kicked up. He wasn't in space anymore. And if he wasn't in space, then... Jace bolted upright, groaning as his ribs protested. His fingers dug into the ground, springy, pulsing slightly under his touch. He yanked his hand back. Great. The planet is breathing. The wreckage of his escape pod lay in twisted heaps behind him, its once sleek metal hull now blackened and broken. Sparks sputtered weakly from the torn wiring. He swallowed hard. No ship. No crew. No sign of other survivors. He was alone. Jace reached for the emergency beacon strapped to his wrist and pressed down hard. The screen flickered. A weak, red pulse blinked, damaged, maybe still sending, maybe not. He had no way of knowing if a signal was getting out. Then something sang. Not a bird. Not a machine. It was a sound unlike anything Jace had ever heard, crystalline and layered, like a symphony of whispering voices mixed with the chime of wind against glass. The hairs on his arms stood on end. He wasn't alone. Jace turned sharply, scanning the horizon. The landscape was wrong in ways he couldn't put into words. Trees stretched impossibly high, their trunks smooth and silver, their translucent leaves shifting colors as though they drank the light itself. Golden pollen floated lazily through the air, catching on the faint breeze. And just beyond the trees they stood, tall, slender, unbelievably graceful. Their skin shimmered, reflecting the hues around them, shifting slightly with every movement. Their hair, impossibly long and weightless, drifted as if gravity barely touched it. Their garments, if they could be called that, were woven from iridescent silk, wrapped in intricate patterns around their delicate frames. But it was their eyes that froze him. Large, luminous, and filled with something Jace hadn't expected. Not hostility, not fear, wonder, and maybe hunger. Jace swallowed hard. The women, if that's what they were, stood utterly still, watching him with eyes that gleamed like liquid opals. Their expressions hovered between fascination and wariness, as if he were some rare, skittish creature they had stumbled upon. Slowly, cautiously, he raised both hands. I come in peace. One of them, taller than the rest, her skin tinged with a faint violet sheen, tilted her head. A few strands of her silver hair drifted, defying gravity as if caught in a slow-motion current. Then, as if a silent agreement had been made, they moved. Not walked, glided. Their feet barely seemed to touch the mossy ground. A murmur rippled through the group, a cascade of notes and harmonics that didn't resemble any language Jace knew. Yet there was rhythm in it. Structure. He braced himself. If they were hostile, he was done for. But instead of attacking, they reached for him. A delicate hand, fingers impossibly long, traced the fabric of his torn uniform. Another brushed against his hair, tugging slightly, as if testing its texture. Jace fought the urge to pull away, unsure if resisting would offend them. And then laughter. Soft. Musical. One of them let out a delighted sound, her wings, wings, fluttering behind her like gossamer glass. Jace's breath caught. They weren't just tall, shimmering humanoids. They were fairies, or something damn close to them. The tallest one reached toward his face, her expression unreadable. Jace tensed but held his ground as her fingers ghosted over his jawline. Her eyes narrowed slightly, pupils dilating. Then she turned to the others and spoke in a language that was nothing but melody and chime. More excited murmuring followed. Jace cleared his throat. "Okay, I'd really like to know what's going on right now." The leader, at least she seemed like the leader, looked back at him. Then, in perfect, eerily smooth English, she said, "You are strange." Jace blinked. Yeah, I get that a lot." More laughter. The others watched with gleeful anticipation, as though he were some exotic pet performing a trick. Then the leader's face grew serious. "You are male?" Jace frowned. "Yeah. Why?" A hush fell over them. The air itself seemed to shift. Their shimmering bodies tensed, as if they had just uncovered something previously thought impossible. The leader's luminous eyes locked onto his, unblinking. "Males do not exist." Jace's stomach dropped. "Oh," he muttered. "That's not good." The murmurs grew, rippling outward in waves of harmonic whispers. Some of the women exchanged glances, their expressions ranging from awe to confusion, and something else. Something more primal. Jace wasn't sure if he was in danger, or if he had just become the rarest, most valuable thing on this planet. Either way, he had a feeling his problems had only just begun. Jace had been in uncomfortable situations before. Bar fights on rough space stations, diplomatic disasters involving alien customs he hadn't read up on, but nothing compared to this. The Fey women had encircled him completely now, their luminous eyes darting between each other as if debating what to do next. The leader, the one with violet-tinged skin, kept her gaze locked on him, her delicate fingers tapping against her own wrist in an oddly human gesture of contemplation. Jace swallowed. "So, if males don't exist, how do you all, continue existing?" The question felt dangerous, but curiosity overruled caution. More murmurs rippled through them. A few tilted their heads, some exchanged what he assumed were amused glances. Finally, the leader responded, her voice calm, almost reverent. "We are born from the ether." Jace frowned. "The ether?" A smaller one, standing near his shoulder, giggled. "You do not know?" Jace rubbed the back of his neck. "Lady, I barely know what planet I'm on." The leader's wings fluttered, almost thoughtfully. "The ether births us. It is our mother, our essence. New life emerges when the stars align and the world calls for it." Jace felt a headache creeping in. So they were born naturally, but without parents? No biological reproduction? He was no xenobiologist, but this broke at least a dozen known rules of evolution. The murmurs shifted, turning softer, more curious. Several of them inched closer again, their fingers brushing over his arms, his chest, everywhere, as if trying to map out his very structure. Jace felt his face burn. "Okay, personal space? It's a thing?" He took a step back. The leader's lips curled in what might have been a smirk. "You are different." Jace huffed. "Yeah, I got that part." A pause. Then, in a voice thick with something unreadable, she asked, "Are you capable of creating life?" Jace's heart stopped. Oh no. The weight of the question sank into him like a stone dropped in deep water. The air itself seemed to change, thicker, heavier. The Fey women stared, anticipation shimmering in their prismatic eyes. Jace took a slow, careful breath. "Okay, listen, I think we might be having a little misunderstanding here." The leader's wings flared slightly. Are we? Jace forced a laugh. Yeah. See, where I come from, both men and women are needed to, make new life. I'm not some kind of walking miracle ingredient, all right? Silence. Then, the leader turned to the others and spoke in that strange musical tongue. Whatever she said sent an excited ripple through the group. Some of them gasped, others clapped their hands over their mouths, wings quivering. Jace took another step back. Why do I feel like that just made things worse? The leader stepped forward. Then, you are part of a pair? Jace hesitated. I mean, theoretically, yeah. But I don't. She held up a hand, silencing him. Her expression had shifted. The curiosity was still there, but now it carried something else. Something decisive. You must come with us. Jace's stomach twisted. Oh, I really don't like where this is going. The leader smiled, serene, certain. You are precious. The Fey women began to move, forming a loose, shimmering procession. They weren't asking. They were taking. Jace had just gone from castaway to prized possession, and he had no idea how to escape. Jace was trapped. Not in a cell, not in chains, but in something far more delicate and impossible to fight. The Fey women had brought him to a city unlike anything he had ever seen, an impossible landscape of floating gardens, bridges woven from strands of living crystal, and towers that shimmered like liquid pearl. The air was thick with bioluminescent pollen, and everywhere he turned, glowing figures moved in perfect harmony. They had given him a place to stay, a palace of sorts, nestled within the heart of their capital. It was stunning. It was comfortable. It was a gilded cage. Everywhere he went, he was accompanied by attendants. They observed him, whispered about him, giggled behind their hands when he tried to speak. Some were bold enough to touch him, tracing his jawline, running fingers through his hair, marveling at his warmth. The leader, whom he had learned was called Lyriel, kept the closest watch. She wasn't unkind. In fact, she was disturbingly gentle, treating him like some sacred artifact that had suddenly sprung to life. Your presence has changed everything, she told him one evening, standing at the edge of a balcony that overlooked their glowing world. You are proof of something we never imagined. Jace rubbed his temples. And what's that? Lyriel turned to him, her luminous eyes filled with something dangerous. That we are incomplete. His stomach dropped. Lyriel, I am one person, not an answer to a cosmic mystery. She smiled. Not an answer. A beginning. And that was when Jace realized. They weren't going to let him leave. He had become too valuable. The thought sent panic crawling through his ribs. His distress beacon had been too weak. There was no guarantee anyone was coming for him. And the longer he stayed here, the harder escape would become. So, that night he made a decision. He was getting off this planet. Jace moved quickly, silently. He had spent enough time observing how the Fey women operated, their patterns, their routines, the way their floating city functioned. He knew where the energy pulses gathered, how the etheric gates worked. And most importantly, he knew how to disrupt them. With careful hands, he dismantled a glowing conduit in the palace's lower levels, causing a momentary power flux. It was subtle, just enough to cause confusion. And it worked. As murmurs of concern spread through the city, Jace slipped away, darting through corridors, down spiraling bioluminescent staircases, weaving through streets of shimmering glass. His target was a portal hub, an anomaly he had seen in the city's core, a swirling rift of energy that pulsed with unknown power. It was a risk. He had no idea where it led. But anywhere was better than here. Just as he reached it, a voice rang out behind him. Jace. He turned. Lyriel stood at the edge of the pathway, her wings spread wide, her expression unreadable. For the first time since meeting her, she looked hurt. "You would leave us?" Jace swallowed. "I have to." She stepped forward, the light of the portal casting strange shadows over her face. "Do you not see? You could change everything. You could be something greater than yourself." Jace exhaled sharply. "I'm just a guy, Lyriel. A lost, tired, human guy who wants to go home." A long silence stretched between them. Then Lyriel smiled. Soft. Understanding. "Then go." Jace blinked. "What?" Lyriel tilted her head. "I will not keep you. But know this, Jace of Earth, our world is forever changed. You have changed it." He hesitated, something unreadable twisting in his chest. Then he turned, stepped into the portal, and the world dissolved around him. Jace woke up to a familiar sight. A cold, sterile medical bay. The hum of Federation technology. A monitor beeping steadily beside him. He was home. A deep breath shuddered through him. Relief. Disbelief. And something else, something he couldn't quite name. He had escaped. He was safe. And yet, when he closed his eyes, he still saw Lyriel's gaze. He had left. But had he really? Somewhere, across the stars, the fairy women still whispered his name. And Jace had the unsettling feeling that one day he'd see them again.